Howdy folks, Brian Cusco here at Triple B. Today we've got Emmanuel van Heygen talking about Madasgascar Day Geckos and the current state of affairs in Madagascar when it comes to the environment for these animals. Very good talk, very good pictures. Hope you guys enjoy it. You're watching Triple B TV.
So yeah, tonight I want to talk a little bit about the biogeography of day geckos, actually the genus Phelsuma, something that I've been, what kept me busy my entire life, or let's say since I was 11 years old. So as I said, passionate about day geckos since 1979. Basically came through my dad, who was always into marine tanks his entire life. But at a certain point, he started venturing into poison arrow frogs, and I drove all over Europe with him, from breeder to breeder or to little stores. And at one point in time, we came in Utrecht, in the Netherlands, and there was a store called the Natuurvriend, which was owned by the Herman Oostveen. And in '79, it was still possible to go somewhere and put your suitcase full of animals and bring it back. And that's where I was introduced to day geckos, to Phelsuma, and that was actually Phelsuma cepediana. And I was lucky enough that my dad decided to buy me a book written by Herman Oostveen, the store owner, on the genus Phelsuma, and also my first pair of Phelsumas, Phelsuma cepediana. And that was a decision of my dad that actually changed my life, because I'm 100% sure if he wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be standing here today. So, as I said, I bought my first Phelsuma book. I bought '79 and my first day geckos. Then, of course, once you're in the hobby, and many people call it a hobby, I heard some different names. I think it's more like a bug or a virus, because it didn't let me go for, I'm now 50. So, and still it comes back. Sometimes I build, my collection. I try to get rid of it. I said, it's enough, but it always comes back and surfaces again. So in 1990, I made my first herping trip, because obviously you want to see the animals that you keep in a terrarium. You want to see them at least I did, and I can encourage everyone to do so. So I made my first trip to Seychelles, to Phelsuma territory, and that was Seychelles. It was actually my honeymoon, my first marriage, which didn't last, obviously, if you decide to go on a honeymoon. And I was not much in the hotel, actually. I was so fascinated by what I saw. So, that didn't last. But anyhow, I made many trips ever since. I try to go every year. I did go every year so far, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a year. And it's always Madagascar or the surrounding islands, which I will show you later in this presentation. My favorite species, and that's actually why it's about biogeography of the genus Phelsuma, is Phelsuma bourbonica, because Phelsuma bourbonica from Reunion Island, I think, is the most special day gecko, and I want to also explain a little bit why it's so special. Actually, the entire Mascarene group, with Mascarene is Mauritius and Reunion and some other smaller islands together. And I'm still keeping and breeding Phelsumas today. As I said, I'm now 50 years old and still doing it, and actually building up my collection again, because the bug got the better hand again. So I'm just going to show you a few species I'm working with today. Phelsuma, I'm sorry if I say Clemery, because I'm used to it, and if I have to force myself to say Clemery, it's going to go wrong anyway. So Phelsuma Clemery, it's one of my favorites as well. It used to be my favorite, definitely. Recently discovered, I used to say, but then I realized it's already been described in 1990, been discovered, which was a revelation. It was such a special animal. I got my first pair in 1992, and I think that together with the Frankfurt Zoo, I was the only one to actually breed these animals in captivity. Another species I'm working with is obviously Phelsuma van Heygen, a species I discovered in 2004 in Madagascar. Then another one is Phelsuma madagascarensis boehmei, a very interesting species that has a very, very small range somewhere in mid-Madagascar in Andasibe. Everybody knows Andasibe or Pyrenees. Lives high in the trees, but a very, very small distribution range. And then my favorite, Phelsuma borbonica. You can see why I think it's one of the most colorful, one of the most variable Phelsuma species out there. So, the genus Phelsuma. Many of them have been dispersed to other regions, even all the way up to the Andaman Islands, which is about 5,000 kilometers from the original range. Everybody thinks the original range is Madagascar. I was talking about the Mascarene Islands. These are the Mascarene Islands right here. That's now Reunion, Mauritius, and here Rodriguez. There is a bunch of smaller islands still here on these banks. Obviously, the majority of the species lives on the island of Madagascar. 7 species, of which 5 endemic in the Comoro Islands. Then in Aldabra and also the other surrounding atolls that are there, Pemba, and then 1 species on mainland Africa, which is Phelsuma dubia. So currently there is about 67 species and subspecies of the genus. So a while ago they divided all the species, all the entire genus into groups. So the groups you see on the left-hand side, there was a few species they couldn't place into groups, so they had no common ancestor, or they couldn't find any common ancestor of those. Those you see on the right, which is here Phelsuma standingi, or standingai I should say here, but Phelsuma standingi, which has no really close relatives. There is Phelsuma andamanensis, or andamanense, that is now living on the Andaman Islands. Then there is Phelsuma serraticauda, although everybody, you could say, they used to think it's closely related to Phelsuma laticauda, but it's actually not. They did some genetic testing, and it's absolutely not closely related to laticauda. It just looks very similar, but it has a very interesting tail. It's the only Phelsuma that actually has a flat tail. And then, of course, Phelsuma clemeri, which was also not placed into any groups. What was placed in groups is in the lineata group. This is the nominate form that you see on the top, Phelsuma lineata. This is Phelsuma pusilla from eastern Madagascar. Then you have the laticauda group. This is just the nominate laticauda, which originates from Madagascar, obviously, but is now also found on the Comoro Islands, on some northern atolls of Madagascar. It's found on Reunion Island, which is pure anthropogenic. How it got there, it's very recent by humans, and it lives obviously on Hawaii, as I think everybody knows. Another member of this group is Phelsuma laticauda annularis, with a much smaller range than the nominate form. So here you see the lineata group and the laticauda group. I just want to highlight here which of these species actually radiated out of Madagascar and here to the Comoro Islands. So you have Comorensis, which is the only member of the lineata group that actually managed to get over to the Comoro Island quite recently, as you can see on the clade. Then Phelsuma laticauda also lives on Mayotte, which is also very, very recent. But much earlier, there is another group. That's the Pasturi, Robert Mettenzi, and then the Venigra complex, which radiated much earlier out of Madagascar, but is actually part of that laticauda group. So they have a common ancestor, laticauda, and this group that lives now on the Comoro Islands. The next group is the dubia group, where you see here a juvenile of Phelsuma dubia. And then one of the rarest Phelsumas that lives in southern Madagascar, Phelsuma malemakebo, but they all belong to the same group, to the dubia group. Here you see as well dubia radiated all the way to the Comoro Islands. Actually on the island of Mayotte only it is found, but that's also very, very recent, as you can see. But more interesting is the other member, which has also a common ancestor as the dubia group, which is Phelsuma nigistriata, which is also present on the Comoro, which is only present, it's an endemic to the island of Mayotte. Then my favorite group, obviously, there is the Mascarene Island group. Actually, they call it the Cepediana group, with Phelsuma cepediana and Phelsuma borbonica. Much more about this group later on. As you can see here, this is the group that radiated actually from Madagascar, but doesn't really have any common ancestor on the island of Madagascar right now, and that's why it's such an interesting group. There is one missing here, which is actually Phelsuma kimbowi. Then not a very relevant group right now, which is the Breviceps group, which is all endemic to Madagascar, no radiation to any of the satellite islands. Then another quite interesting group with Phelsuma van Heygeni and Phelsuma astriata. It's the astriata group, and the only animal that could be found on Madagascar that is closely or at least related to the group that is endemic to the Seychelles Islands is actually this Phelsuma van Heygeni. Then another group that everybody knows very well, it's the Madagascariensis group with Phelsuma kochi here, and then probably the most popular Phelsuma or day gecko, which is Phelsuma grandis, which is also present in Florida on Reunion Island, and yeah, has been introduced to many, many other places in the world at this point. So here, as I was saying, the only member that is a Malagasy Phelsuma is Phelsuma van Heygeni, that is part of this astriata group. So they share a common ancestor. And then as well, the Madagascariensis group, these are the animals that radiated from this group, which also have a common ancestor, which is here Phelsuma abotisumtio, and then Phelsuma aboti from Aldabra, and abotisumtio is from the island of Assumption. A few instances where the common ancestor actually got to the Comoro Islands, which you see here. Probably one instance where the Seychelles were populated out of Madagascar, and at a later stage also these coral atolls like Aldabra, Assumption, Bijoutier, and also the Farquhar group. They were populated by Phelsuma much more recent. So now let's go to the islands themselves. Here you have the Seychelles. This is you have two main groups of the Seychelles. You have the granitic islands, which is actually a remnant of Gondwana land, which is still granite. It's not volcanic, although there has been some volcanic activity over the past million years when India separated from the African continent. But these are remnants that were left somewhere in the middle of the ocean, and these are the granitic islands of the Seychelles. The island you see here is Nord Island, that's Silhouette Island, and that's the main island in the back, which is Mahé. And then you have the Seychelles, the coral, or the atolls, where you see here Bijoutier, which is another group. They're much more far away from that main granite group. And it's generally accepted that the granite islands, they were actually populated out of Madagascar, and then they radiated from there to the coral islands of the Seychelles. So just some biotope pictures, or just so you have an idea of how it looks like. This is the main island, where you see main granite rocks, a lot of palm trees. These are not coconut palms, but you have the entire Seychelles Island are very, very rich, the entire region actually, very rich in palms. So a lot of palm trees and tropical rainforest. Here you see, the beaches, the granite boulder of the beaches of Ladique, world famous. But these are all the biotopes where the Phelsumas live on Seychelles. As I said, very rich in palms. There is one of the most ancient palms that is still present today, which is the Coque de Mer, which is the biggest palm in the world. If you would, this is a sprouting leaf. If you put a human, which I actually should have done, well, it will maybe reach to here. It's a huge leaf, which is almost 6 meters high, and this is just a young leaf sprouting. The trees are immense. Then you have the pandanus trees, that are present in these palm forests, but this is a typical biotope on the island of Praslin. It's called Vallée de Mai, which is also a World Heritage Site at this point. Then the coral atolls, they have of course a total different biotope. The coasts look like this, quite idyllic, and the inland, looks a little bit like this. This is a picture taken on Desroches Island. This is Desroches Island, the coastline, and this is Daros. The granitic group of the Seychelles, this is from Praslin Island and Ladique, which is Phelsuma sundbergi, the biggest of the Astriata group. They get about 25 centimeters. Here you see them, this one is sitting on the flower, or actually of the male coque de mer tree, and they're actually helping in pollinating these palms. As you can see, they're licking actually the nectar of the little flowers. Another subspecies of sundbergi, there is only two. There used to be Ladiguensis too, but they all have now become sundbergi. This is Longunculae, very, very variable species, the most variable of the subspecies of Seychelles, where you can see here complete green with the yellow eye-ring. The yellow eye-ring here, but completely different pattern. And then this one, even, more difference. These one are the coastal forms, the ones you see here, and then on the mainland of Mahé, in the interior, in the rainforests, that's what you find there in the tropical forest. Very variable, but all the same. Then on the coral atolls, this is Phelsuma aboti from Assumption. This is the Phelsuma aboti Checkei from Madagascar, and this is actually Phelsuma aboti from the Aldabra Atoll. These can be quite like every single aboti looks kind of the same. These are very variable. They can look exactly like this, although these are much, much smaller than the animals from Madagascar. These are completely different, as you can see. They're much more sumptuous, hence the name Aboti. So they're a fatter gecko and also the biggest of all three aboti subspecies. Then we move from Seychelles to the Comoro Islands. This is the volcanic island of Mayotte, as you can see here still with the craters. This is actually the smaller island with where the airport is built. It's French, so it's very, very well developed. Here you see the main island, but you have here, it's part of the capital. This is the city of Dzaoudzi, and then the city of Mamoudzou is right, not in view, but that's the biggest city. But it's very, very well developed with well-developed roads. It's actually like a piece of Europe in the tropics. It's not a department of France, but it's a territory of France. Biotope shots, one of the most important ones is the big bamboos. They're spread out throughout the island, and actually two species are endemic. There is a total of 3 endemic species on Mayotte, and 2 of them live, St. Patrick, on this bamboo forest, or these bamboo patches, which can be found all over the island. One of them that doesn't live on bamboo is Phelsuma Robert Mertensi. Can be found like basically on everything. Can be found on bamboo, but it is not necessarily found only on bamboo. It can be in gardens, it can be on banana trees, can be basically everywhere. This is Phelsuma nigistriata from the Dubia group. This species is found only on bamboo, and the only other place we found nigistriata is high up in the mountains in some pandanus trees. This is Phelsuma pastori, also pure bamboo-dwelling Phelsuma. So now we come to, in my opinion, the interesting part. As I said, this is the radiation which we talked about. I'm not going to go to mainland Africa, but it's actually how did the Phelsuma species from Rodriguez, Mauritius, Reunion, and some of the smaller islands here, not here, some of the smaller islands there, how did they get there? Because there is no common ancestor currently present on Madagascar. I've been digging a little bit, and I found a story which is quite interesting, and that's a story of the blue pigeon. And the blue pigeon is a pigeon species that populated Madagascar, and every single island, like with Phelsumas, has actually its own species. Reunion had its own species, or subspecies. Mauritius has its own species, Rodriguez. Some of the smaller islands, the Cargadon Islands here, and the Comoros have their own species. Madagascar has its own species, and Seychelles has its own species of blue pigeon. But again, there is so much difference in these pigeons that the common ancestor was actually found all the way in Thailand. And so it is generally believed that these islands, that there was actually a group of islands that was existing here for sure until the last ice age, which is only like 18,000 years ago, that all these islands were actually present and above sea level. And of course have been way before that and only disappeared like 18,000 years ago. So there was enough time to develop. If there is enough time to develop several species of pigeons, there must be enough time to develop several species of day geckos. So these are pictures from different coral atolls. This is, for instance, these both are Aldabra. This is Bijoutier. But this is how it probably has looked like 18,000 years ago. It's also generally believed that there was quite rough coasts with a lot of limestone, a lot of coral, and that the rest, the interior, was actually all palm savanna, which is of course ideal for Phelsuma to develop. And the islands must have been broken down to smaller and little islands the more the sea levels rise. So of course it was possible that some animals radiated from there to those smaller islands. The youngest island of all is the island of Reunion, which still has peaks like the Piton de la Fournaise, the Piton de Neige, which still has like a peak from 3,200 meters, which is quite high considering that the island is only like 100 kilometers wide and about 100 kilometers long and about 80 kilometers wide. Again, French island, as you can see, this is the capital of Saint-Denis, quite well developed with the international airport, the port of St. Paul, and everything what you see green here is sugarcane. Obviously, it used to be forest from top to bottom. Only on the southern side you can still see some native forest all the way down to the ocean. But still, a lot of remaining forest present on Reunion, one of the most beautiful places on earth if you love nature and mountains and forests. Very beautiful. So these are the typical habitats for Phelsuma borbonica, especially these habitats where you have these single trees sticking out of the forest or whatever you have it. That's where you would find Phelsuma borbonica. Another biotope for borbonica and the other species that lives there, which is Phelsuma inexpectata, would be the pandanus trees. Like all the pandanus, there's 3 endemic pandanus trees on the Mascarenes. They all occur on Reunion, Mauritius, and Rodriguez. So this is, you would find, for instance, Phelsuma borbonica here on the sun-exposed tree trunks, and mostly the females in the pandanus trees. Here, this would be a perfect tree for basking, and mostly egg-laying and seeking cover for the rain, which is quite heavy, will be always in the pandanus. So here you see Phelsuma inexpectata, an incredibly beautiful species, probably one of the most, I can't say endangered, because there is so many in that little area where they live. They basically live in a village. It's like the village of Manapani, and it's maybe 100 meters to the left, 200 meters to the right, but they live in that village, and that's the only place where they occur. And they don't expand, but they don't disappear either. I've been going to this place since 1991. Every time I was there again last year, population never changes, but for some reason they don't expand to the next village or to the next field, or it's very, very, very weird. But just to give you an idea how many there are in that small little habitat, this papaya tree, I don't know that you can count. There is one you're going to miss because it's hard to see. But there is 7 on one little tree, which is quite amazing for Phelsuma, knowing they're very, very territorial. It's not only a male with females, there is several males in this picture as well. Then from the northern coast of Reunion, you have Phelsuma bourbonica, which is actually the Terratypica. That's the animals that were originally described from Saint-Denis. It's actually called Le Brûlé, which is all the way on top in the mountains. Then the next, which is a subspecies, is Phelsuma bourbonica mater, which was described in 1995. This is their typical habitat. As you can see, there is one right there, which is the same animal in this picture. But this is Phelsuma bourbonica mater in their habitat. That's how they look like a little bit closer. Again, incredible, beautiful animals, a lot of variety in their patterns. But with mater, what you always have is these blue eye rings. Every single mater has blue eye rings. So I've seen many animals that are offered as well in Europe, as well here on some sites in the US, which is offered as Phelsuma bourbonica mater. If they don't have blue eye rings, you can be sure it's not mater. Every single animal I've seen in my life in the wild has blue eye rings. Then from the east coast, again, Phelsuma bourbonica. Again, very variable, as I said, but incredibly beautiful animals. This is a little bit further to the south. You find animals like these. Then to the island of Mauritius, which is the second youngest island of the Mascarenes, about 8 million years old. Biotope on Mauritius, quite similar to Reunion, although less rough. It's much more flat. There is no peaks of 3,000 meters on this island. The entire island has been destroyed for sugarcane, except this valley which you see here, which is Black River Gorge in the south of the island, is the only spot on the island where there's still native forest left. Native forest that looks like the picture here. So these are some biotope pictures. This would be the spot where you would find Phelsuma rosicularis, high up in the mountains in the native forest on the, they call it ebony trees. Then the highland form of Sepediana you would find here in the traveler's palm of the Ravenella madagascariensis. And this is a mixed biotope in the highlands of Mauritius. A species that used to occur on the mainland because they found egg sites and egg deposits, but is no longer present on the mainland, only on some satellite islands. They rediscovered it on Round Island quite a while ago. And it was recently, where these pictures are taken, it was recently reintroduced because it has lived there. They also found egg deposits there of Phelsuma gunteri. So this is the biggest species of Phelsuma and probably the oldest Phelsuma out there. It's the common ancestor of all the Mascarene species. And as you can see, it's that old that it still has a kind of vertical pupil, which actually want to say that they come from the nocturnal geckos.
How big is it?
It's about 30 to 32 centimeters. The males are about a little bit smaller. Impressive animals like. Then Phelsuma gimboi, which is also introduced by our late friend Mr. Sean McEwen in Hawaii. He was curator in Hawaii. He's the only one that traveled to Mauritius quite a few times, so it's very weird that they all of a sudden appear there. So this is Phelsuma rosicularis, which looks similar to Phelsuma gimboi, but actually has very little to do with it. These animals have a common ancestor with Phelsuma bourbonica from Reunion. They only live in the highlands above 400 meters. Then a species that live on the entire island, another very beautiful Phelsuma, is Phelsuma ornata. Can be found everywhere and on everything. Can be found on rocks, on plants, on banana trees, basically everywhere on the entire island, the most widespread Phelsuma on the island. And then of course Phelsuma sepediana, which could be two subspecies. Nobody described it yet, but it will happen anytime soon. That is the typical highland form of Phelsuma sepediana. which you can recognize by its complete green sides, not marbled wrecks, they're completely green forelimbs and hind limbs. A lowland form of Phelsuma sepediana, where you can clearly see the white and gray speckled limbs. This is typical for the lowland form of Phelsuma sepediana. And then, very sad, but we have to mention it, Madagascar. Of course, I can put a nicer picture of Madagascar than this one, but I obviously did it for a reason, because this is how Madagascar, or at least 80% of Madagascar, looks like today. And you could have seen yesterday in the movie from Beyond, almost the same sad story. These are areas that I visited frequently. This forest, I know by now, is completely gone. We used to camp here, right in the middle of the forest, but there is nothing left of this entire forest. It's all burned. They have like a slash and burn technique. So they burn the land, they grow their dry rice, and once the land is too poor, they just abandon it and they move on and slash and burn the next piece, while they in the meantime get all the bigger trees out to for charcoal or for building material, and until nothing's left. This looks still quite green, but it's not. It's secondary vegetation. This has recently been burned and recently been abandoned. This has been abandoned a longer time, and luckily, whatever happens there, in those forests, there are bamboo patches, but they're confined by the other trees. And what happens is, when you burn it and you slash it, the bamboo roots, they remain, they stay in the ground. So the minute they abandon the land, they still cut the bamboo while it's growing in their rice field, so they keep on cutting the bamboo. But once they abandon it, this is what happens. You see this is a village, looks pretty green, but basically it's all bamboo. Everything you see around this village is bamboo. They get more disastrous when they even start cutting the bamboo. But anyhow, that happens too. And this is what you see if you fly over Madagascar. It's like it's burning everywhere you see. This is still primary forest, but it's literally day by day it's eaten away. Very, very sad. But it's not all bad news, because what you see here are 3 species that actually benefit from all of this. This is Phelsuma clemeri, Phelsuma van Heygen, and Phelsuma saipi, which are pure bamboo Phelsumas. So what happens is, of course, all of a sudden their habitat is enlarged by huge surfaces that all of a sudden that they were confined in a small patch of bamboo in the forest. So they kind of explode in these bamboo forests. And the populations of these 3 geckos in those new bamboo forests is immense. Species we never have to worry about, because they live in secondary forests, they live on houses, they live basically everywhere. Our famous one, probably the most abundant day gecko on Madagascar, is Phelsuma grandis, Phelsuma dubia, and Phelsuma laticauda. You find them everywhere. They don't care whether it's primary forest. Actually, you never find them in the primary forest. These species, well, there is some concern. They're quite abundant where they live. This is Phelsuma bimaculata, Phelsuma madagascarensis, and Phelsuma pusilla almani. The thing is, they live in secondary forest. You won't see them around villages or whatever, but they thrive in secondary forest. But more problematic gets it for these guys, which are pure primary forest dwelling animals, like Phelsuma madagascarensis burmi, Phelsuma guttata, and Phelsuma flavigularis. Once the forest is gone, they are gone. And that's a sad story for the Phelsumas. We heard yesterday the same thing, but it's a sad story for these guys as well, because it's the same story. Once the forest is gone, these guys are gone. Uroplatus will be gone, a lot of Mantella species will be gone, and of course, the majestic Caluma parsoni will be gone. And this, by the way, is also an animal from Saint-Marie. So, okay, that was it. I thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I really enjoyed your presentation, man. Next week, we've got Robert Fisher talking about social responsibility and the herpetoculture trade, and kind of referencing Fijian iguanas and albino king snakes in the Canary Islands. Until then, you've been watching Triple B TV. Y'all take care.